Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, featuring stories from the oral history website voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life stories for present-day listeners and for generations to come. Our entire collection is available on the website voicesofoklahoma.com. Subscribe to be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. Here's another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com. Danna Sue Walker wrote the People and Places column 6 days a week in the Tulsa World for at least 24 years. Her column kept readers informed about the fundraisers and events for many of the city's nonprofit organizations, and the column is one of the reasons Tulsa is known as a caring and philanthropic city. A native of Tulsa, Danna Sue graduated from the University of Tulsa. She joined the World in 1962 as society editor and left to raise her daughters before returning in 1981 to write the column. She was inducted into the University of Tulsa Communications Hall of Fame in 2005 and received the Bill Crawford Memorial Award for commitment to the arts. In her oral history interview, Danna Sue talks about living at the Tulsa Country Club, her lifelong friend, and of course, people and places, on the podcast and website, voicesofoklahoma.com.
My name is John Erling, and today's date is December 10th, 2024. So, Danna Sue, would you state your full name, please?
Danna Sue Walker Wolf.
And we are recording this interview, oral history interview, in the facilities of voicesofoklahoma.com. Your birth date?
November 3rd, 1941.
Making your present age?
83.
83. Where were you born?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Let's talk about your mother, her name and where she came from and where she lived.
Alice Jane Frick was her maiden name. She was from Missouri. Her mother was a want-to-be novelist at one time, I think, and that was a long time ago. Her mother went to a university of Missouri, I think, which was very unusual for a woman in that era. Mother was very zany, kind of a Lucille Ball type person. And she and my father were the most romantic couple ever. He would be out hunting and pick flowers for her to bring home.
Well, let's bring him in, his name.
Danner Grimes.
All right. But your mother, her personality, she apparently was very outgoing.
Very outgoing. As I say, kind of a Lucille Ball type person. Super smart, but came off as just kind of a zany character.
Mm-hmm. So then your father's personality, and where was he born and grew up?
He was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas, I think, moved to Texas. His mother was one of the first non-Indian school teachers in Oklahoma.
Say that again.
So his mother was the first white school teacher in Oklahoma.
Really? I wonder where she taught school, do you know?
She would talk about it, some little tiny schoolhouse with all ages in it, on the prairie,
So then your father, what did he do for a living?
He was a manager of the Tulsa Country Club. He actually started as the assistant manager of the old Tulsa Club because his cousin was the manager way back then at that time.
Was your father a golfer? How did he get to...
He was a medium golfer. He had the opportunity to do it. When he was very young and first went to the Tulsa Country Club, that was back in the days where the Kennedys were a big, huge family out there, and Sam Kennedy, I don't know for sure which generation of Kennedys he was, asked Daddy if he wanted to go hunting. And Daddy said, sure, but I don't have a gun. So Sam lent Daddy his gun or bought him one, something. And I think the same thing happened with golf clubs.
Okay. So the Kennedys, people probably don't know, that was a prominent family in Tulsa?
Yes. I don't think that they were Indian. I think that they had some Indian people that they married. Headrights, all that
Were
stuff.
they in oil and gas, the Kennedy family?
I think so, but I'm not positive. But I think so.
Is there a Kennedy building named after them downtown?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
And they had big, huge, lovely homes kind of around the Tulsa Country Club, past the golf course.
So that was real ta-de-ta then, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
So then you grew up in that environment.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It was wonderful. Let's see, I guess I was born, mother brought me home from the hospital to the Tulsa Country Club. All the members were like my family. All the waiters were like my family. I just got to run all around, and I had a big imagination, so I could be fighting in the jungles, and I would run around the golf course, and I'm sure golfers didn't love it, but I never got in big trouble for it.
Mm-hmm. Who is this child running around? And does the mom and dad know that she is?
And see, and then I became, because I was this very curious little girl, and I was an only child. So, I mean, all those people I loved so much, and they took care of me. And in fact, I think they made my job at the Tulsa World easier, because when I started doing that, it was a lot of the same people that I was interacting with and stuff, and they all knew me, and it just was very easy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So your house then was on the club or near the club?
The top floor of the clubhouse.
Oh, really? Top floor. So then they let you come downstairs?
All the time. I mean, I was just there.
You thought it was your house?
I thought it was my house. I mean, I never even thought differently.
Well, then meals, they would serve meals there.
Mother didn't learn to cook for years because we just ordered off the menu and they brought it upstairs.
Wow. Were you living the life of Riley, as we say?
Yes. And even I had a Cocker Spaniel named Buff, and they brought her a hamburger patty, and this one waiter that I just loved so much, he loved Buff, so he would bring her a hamburger patty and a goblet crystal glass, not fine,
right.
Not fine crystal, but just that shape of ice water, and that's what Buff had for her. And she would, of course, we'd let her out. She'd run around the club grounds, and there was a men's grill in the bottom of the clubhouse with big glass windows, and Buff would pop up in one of those windows, and the guys playing cards would say, "Oh, there's Buff." And they would go and open the door, let Buff in, then they had to open another door to let her in the back way, and she would go up through the kitchen where all the waiters and the chefs and all that fed her. So if we had not moved from the Tulsa Country Club, she would have died years before, because she was a rotund Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah, with all that food being served. Yeah. So you recall then going to school. Where was your elementary school?
First it was Lombard, then it was Osage.
Lombard Elementary?
Lombard Elementary, Osage Elementary. Then I moved to the Swan Lake area because, Daddy decided that he didn't want to stay in that environment forever. So he built and started, Utica Square was just beginning. So whoever was in charge of Utica Square said, well, why don't you do a restaurant and come out to Utica Square, and then you won't live down there anymore, and it'll be a different environment. So he did, and he did Danner's Cafeteria.
Danner's Cafeteria in Utica Square.
Which is, it used to be the Olive Garden for a while, but now they've changed it, and they've moved.
But that was the location?
That was the location.
So then you lived near Utica Square then?
Right.
So that brings you to about what age, and where you in
fifth
school?
grade. Fifth grade. And then I went to Lincoln Elementary School.
Lincoln Elementary. Man, that's 3 elementaries.
Right. And then Horace Mann Junior High School.
You went to Horace Mann Junior High School.
Yeah.
And then Tulsa Central.
Right.
Did you ever want to be a golfer?
No. I went ice skating on the whole golf course one time. It was evidently, I wanted to be a ballerina, figure skater, all that for about 10 minutes. But I still remember so well, it was kind of snowing. Daddy knocked on my door and he said, "You want to go ice skating on the golf course?" Because it had fallen the ice and it was really crystally and you could hear it crack. And I said yes, and so Mother got me all fixed up and away we went, and I felt like it was the adventure of forever. I mean, I can remember, you feel like you can remember stuff, but I can remember how it was kind of prickly on my face and going down the hills and with Daddy. I mean, a little girl and her daddy. That's everybody's dream.
And look at, you even remember the sprinkling on your cheeks all these years later.
Yeah.
That was a pretty special moment.
Yeah, it was great.
Then you also, in this time period, you had an aunt and uncle who lived in La Jolla, California.
Yes.
And a family member was in business with Walt Disney.
Correct.
So there was an experience for you there.
Yes. That family member was Helen Alvarez. I'm sure she started Channel 6 television.
Oh.
She was a glam gal, kind of like an Elizabeth Taylor type person.
Okay.
Yeah. So her brother was married to my mother's sister.
Okay.
So we would spend a lot of summers in La Jolla.
But tell us your experience of going to the set and Walt Disney and all that.
Oh, yeah, that was exciting. So, of course, I was a big movie fan because I was in the 7th, 8th grade. And Helen, woman that was in all these businesses with Walt Disney and that, said, okay, I got you a pass and you're supposed to meet Albert Zug Smith in his office, and then he's going to have somebody take you around. And then, so her mother was with me, of course. And we did that. It was fabulous. I got to talk to different people. Peter Lawford was on a set, got to talk to him. I know it was just, one of those movie fantasy things. It was fun.
Right. But didn't somebody say you ought to take a screen test?
Yes, they did. Yes. So anyway, they gave me a script to take home to Tulsa and look at and all of that stuff. Then I got back to Tulsa, and actually in later years my children used that to play with and did little plays and stuff using that script. But anyway, I got back to Tulsa. I was in the Days that year with friends and so forth, and I guess felt like I was getting ready to be a movie star. But then I got the chance. I was going to go to college, and I did not want to not go to college. I'm also an only child, and have a very close best friend, Roxana. And
Roxana who?
Lorton.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I didn't want to leave her. We were together all the time. We lived close to each other. Anyway, so I said, no, I don't want to do that. Maybe later. But, of course, later never came. Then you go to college, then you fall in love, get married, have children, But it was a fun experience.
Were you offered a contract?
Yes.
A contract?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well, but I didn't sign it. I don't know. That was back in the days when, weren't they trying to get a whole bunch of little starlets and stuff going on? I think that they were serious, but I doubt that they just threw themselves on the floor when I said no. I think I was probably one of many.
Have you talked to Peggy Helmrich about these things?
Yes.
Share, what would you talk to her about?
Gosh, that was, I don't even know if I remember our conversations. I just remember she had heard about it and asked me about it.
We should say that Peggy Helmrich, of course, was a movie star, and then left that to come here to Tulsa to be with Walt Helmrich and all. So you do have that in common. She went on and made films.
She made some films, though, and stuff,
right.
yeah. She was Peggy Dow.
Peggy Dow, right. But you weren't pursuing your dream of being a Hollywood star. If somebody had been, they might have jumped at that immediately.
Oh, I'm sure.
But since it was not on your radar, you want me to be a star? That's probably why it was easy for you to shut it down.
It was interesting because I was very interested in acting. I had taken acting lessons from Isabel Ronan.
At Tulsa Central?
Well, I got a pass because I was a senior, I guess, and so I could leave school and go to Isabel's, which she lived in a small house, I think with her sister for a while, very near, and I could walk and take these, and I loved taking the lessons, and I always kind of had that want to be an actress, or, at that age, particularly, and movies were big then. But no, I think I've always really liked where I am in my life at the time. That's a very lucky thing.
That was very lucky.
Yeah, I loved being in college. I loved going to New Orleans to college. I just have kind of liked every single part, and I didn't want to. And I bet part of it was probably, looking back, I was not a very independent person. I think I probably just didn't want to go off by myself somewhere.
How old were you then at that age?
15, 16.
Okay. Your mother certainly wouldn't let you go out there by yourself.
Oh, no, I mean, she went with me the time that we were there.
Even if you accepted work.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure, no.
Right. The name Isabel Ronan, was she a teacher at Tulsa Central?
She was a very famous speech. I don't know whether she ever actually taught at Central or not, but she taught Tony Randall. She taught
Paul Harvey?
Paul Harvey. Had a conversation with Paul Harvey about her one time. He came to something, and I got there early to interview him, but I got there early enough, and he was there that nobody else was there. He was so funny. He was a darling person. And he said, "Did you actually take from Isabel Ronan?" And I said, "Yes." And we compared notes and told funny stories about her and stuff. She was very interesting.
I think that he has given credit to her on his national broadcasts.
Yeah.
And I remember he was coming to Tulsa for maybe the Salvation Army event, and I had him on the air, and he, in that interview, talked about Tulsa Central and mentioned Isabel Ronan. So that's why it flagged me.
So maybe she was at Central, but by the time I was in the picture, she was in her little house nearby.
And Tony Randall, you said, too?
I even talked to him on the phone one time. I was taking a lesson from her, and I guess they remained really good friends, and he called. And I was learning how to do The Last Duchess, the portrait on the wall, and anyway, I was learning how to do that, and Isabel was telling me how to do the intonations and how to stop here and continue. Anyway, and so Tony Randall called, and so she was telling me, and then she said, "I want you to talk to this young lady," and so we talked for like 30 seconds. You know, hi, how are you? Oh, fine, it's so nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Are you learning from Isabel?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's fun. So in Tulsa Central, then, were you active in a lot of activities?
Medium, I think. The days a lot. I think I was not the main.
When you say the days.
Oh, DAZE.
And what does that mean?
It was a big annual show that Central High School students put on that they sold tickets to and made some money from. It was a pretty well-received kind of, people thought it was pretty great. They thought it was more professional than high school students usually do.
So was it music? Was it acting?
Music, different little skits, all groups. Like you'd be invited to be in a tap dance group, or you'd be, some speeches, not really speeches, short squib, funny things that people would do, mainly skits. Music skits like tap dancers, or funny comedy skits.
Mm-hmm. So this is, you were there in 1957, 58?
Let's see, I graduated in 59, yeah.
So those are the years you were there. Are there any other people that we may know publicly that were in your class at Tulsa Central?
Jim Woolsey.
Jim Woolsey.
Head of the CIA for a minute.
Anybody else you might think of?
Rita, what was her name? She married David Gates, the bread singer.
Yeah, bread. Right,
yeah,
right.
He even came back to Tulsa for something one time. I mean, in my later years. Very darling girl from Central, and he was from Will Rogers.
David Gates.
David Gates. And he came to Central one time when people knew that he and Rita were going together, and did part of like a student assembly thing and sang to her and stuff.
So he was known back in 59 or so for his music ability.
Yeah, because that's when he wrote Joe Baby. That was a really popular song in that era. And so he came from Will Rogers to Central to sing that song to her during an assembly. And of course, we all just swooned and thought it was...
And her name was Rita.
Joe Rita.
Joe Rita.
And the song was Joe Baby. And they're still married today.
So then you graduate in 1959, and then what happens?
Then I go to Sophie Newcomb in New Orleans.
Sophie Newcomb College in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why Sophie Newcomb College?
Because, and this is a Roxana thing again, Roxana and her mother, we decided, or her dad, Bela Roja, was giving a piano concert in New Orleans. And so Roxana and her mother and I decided to go down and see the concert. And we got to spend the night in the Sophie Newcomb dormitory, one of the houses or something. And I just fell in love with the whole situation. Just New Orleans, anyway, so I thought I would try to apply, and I did, and I was accepted, and went there for really, I think, just a year, and then came back to TU.
Okay. Now we have to go back to Roxana, because everybody knows her as Roxana Lorton. Roxana Lorton, and of course married to Robert Lorton, the owners of the Tulsa World at the time. You said Roxana's father?
Bela Roja.
And so Roxana, her maiden name was Roxana?
Was Roja, R-O-Z-S-A.
Roja, okay.
Yeah.
And so her father, again, the name?
Bela.
And he played piano?
Well, he was a concert pianist. He came from Hungary. He did lots of musical things before he came to TU. He was a professor of advanced something, music, scores, all of that. I mean, he was a fascinating individual.
And he lived in Tulsa?
And he lived in Tulsa on Swan Lake.
Okay.
So see, I think that's how we met, living close to each other.
Because you met Roxana then, because you lived over there.
Because Roxana, my front door bell rang. We were in the 5th grade. So I opened the door, and there was this little girl with long, dark braids on roller skates. And she said, my best friend used to live in this house, but she had to move, so now you have to be my best friend. And I said, okay. and all these years later, let's see, what do we figure? 75 years we've been friends, something like that.
Wow.
We still are.
How fortunate.
Isn't that the best thing ever?
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you two get together, you have a lot of fun sharing memories, don't you?
Yes, we do.
When at Sophie Newcomb College, were you getting homesick, or you just felt I needed to be back in Tulsa?
I think I was always homesick. I loved the experience. I loved being in New Orleans. I think I was just homesick.
Mm-hmm. Did Roxana go to Tulsa Central with you? Are you the same age?
Yeah.
You're the same age?
Yeah.
So she also?
Yeah.
So the two of you were buddies in high school?
Yeah.
Then did she go on to schooling?
She went on to TU.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so then you were there together?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. You came home because my best friend's at TU.
Yeah.
And I want to come home and be with her.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Your experience then at Tulsa University, your classes and your interests, did they begin to develop there?
Yeah, journalism. Remember Ed Dumet?
I do know that name.
So actually he asked me to do some radio thing with him one time, and I was going to, but I ended up not doing it, and I regret that I didn't, because I loved him and I thought it would be very fascinating. But at that age, I don't know how far ahead we think. I was just enjoying every single thing I was doing. And I guess I didn't think I had time to
do anything,
learn how to do that, or I don't know.
On the radio, right.
Yeah.
Ed Dumet, they still hear his voice today on KWGS.
That voice.
And the IDs, as we call them, when he says KWGS, I can't even say it the way he said it. And I've interviewed Ed Dumet here for our oral history project, voicesofoklahoma.com. What a dear man.
Oh.
A wonderful human being.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a good man. So then you didn't do that, but okay, you said journalism immediately. Where did your interest in journalism come from?
I started writing stories and little short stories and stuff in grade school. And I was horrible in math. I never got it. But I always was really easy with language. So, I think I just fell into an easy pattern and took headline writing classes, Tom Wood, who also eventually, well, these are, see, like old professors that went into journalism. Anyway, so I loved my professors. I loved the ease of the classes because it was so different than, more unstructured than high school. I just liked the casualness of it, everything. I sort of liked not out of the box. I liked the way people in that business or thought. I liked their thinking process.
Creativity.
Just creativity,
Yeah.
and who knows what they're going to think. And it's just going to be a fascinating conversation. So I loved that.
Since you were writing when you were young, were you a reader when you were young?
Yes, constantly. In fact, my mother started reading to me before I started school. And I think we would start reading Nancy Drew mysteries. And Mother remembers this so well, and so it made me feel like I could remember it, that she'd say, honey, I cannot read anymore. My voice is getting out. And so I would say, well, show me, because I want to finish. I want to go on. So I learned how to read before I went to school.
What a gift that was.
And I am just still at it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is marvelous. When promoting reading these days, they're encouraging, of course, parents to do that. And now we have reading programs.
Yeah.
Reading, children not being able to read is a major concern.
Yeah.
So you graduated with what degree?
Journalism and a minor in speech.
Okay. Because you like to perform.
Yes. I was always the one that raised my hand, and I guess I'll stand up in front of the class and read the poem, yeah.
Okay. All right. So what year did you graduate?
63.
1963.
Yeah.
So then were you out to, I got to go work for a newspaper, or what did you do?
I was already doing that. I had worked there before I graduated. In fact, the first thing I did was...
when you say there, you mean the Tulsa World?
Tulsa World was help count puzzle stuff, but probably like in early college. Things that came, I don't even remember, just helping them count different things. Then I was hired to do the bridal column and arrange all the brides that were going to be on the covers and that stuff. They used to have big cover pages of different brides, and kind of coordinate that and write those stories. I mean, that was just who was married, blah, 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 nothing. Then Julie Blakely, who did the People and Places column, and I got to be friendly because I worked for her a summer even before I started all that, and she said, you should take this over when I retire. And I thought that just sounded great, and so we kind of worked me in, and then for a while it was People and Places by Julie Blakely and Danna Sue Grimes, I was then. And then when she retired, my name just slid in. All
right. So I like beginnings. Did you pursue the newspaper? When you were at the University of Tulsa, did you pursue them? Or did they come looking for...
I didn't pursue them. I mean, of course, I knew Roxana and Bob then, at least along the way toward the end, because they met and married toward the end of TU.
And Bob was with the newspaper because his father really owned the paper at that time.
We would talk about it, and I think we'd say, someday do you want to do that?
Okay.
But just casual conversation. But then it became, as I graduated and because I worked for the Junior Chamber of Commerce. I did ads for them for a while at that building on 18th Street. It used to be a building down there that they were in. I did that, and then it just evolved into, why don't you just come here and do this? And then Julie wanted, she said, and I loved it, and that's what I wanted to do.
Look, when you trace yours back, that day that Roxana came to your house, and then it was an easy blend into the newspaper. She didn't know she was going to be married into a newspaper, and it just comes together like that for you.
And it was just also easy.
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, that's a great story. And then you helped Troy Gordon.
Oh, that's probably what I was talking about a while ago that I couldn't think of. I helped Troy he was doing some kind of a
football scoring contest.
That was it. Yeah, and I helped him do that, and just fell madly in love with him. Oh my! And his wife. Such darling people.
So tell our audience who Troy Gordon was.
Troy Gordon was a writer for the Tulsa World. He had his own column. I think it was called Round the Clock, maybe. Just general chit-chat, nothing too serious, but he just covered everything. He was just a easygoing, darling person.
Huh. Did his wife?
Joanne.
She wrote too.
Mm-hmm, she did.
The same column or something?
No, she did different kinds. Hers was a little more breezy, I think. This has been so long ago, but she was really, really darling. She was responsible for me having a pigtail in Time magazine.
All right, tell us.
So back in that time, in that era, in the sewers by the Arkansas River, the sewage didn't go through. It was just rainwater and stuff. Kids that liked to play the guitar and that sort of thing started hanging out in those sewers if their parents didn't want them to bother them practicing at home. And it turned out to be something almost like catacombs, because we would go in there and there would be candles, and you'd get the candles and walk down in there more and kind of sit against...
In the big conduit?
Yeah. And then kind of sit with your back against the wall. And there was, of course, a little water going there, and candles would float down there. And then people would play. And Joanne thought that was the most fascinating thing. She wanted to go, and she wanted to do a story for Time magazine. So she took some photos, and then she said, well, it all just came out. You've got to look, your pigtails in there. Because in those days, I wore my hair in those little things, and I guess they got my pigtail. Oh. And that was all. And I said, my claim to fame, I don't know. I'll never make Time again.
Oh, my. And that would have been how old and what year? Oh, gosh.
I think I was married by then. I think it was 65, something in that vicinity.
65, 66.
And people would say they could hear music coming up out of the sewers, and they wondered what in the world is going on.
That's funny. Do you still have that Time magazine?
I don't think so. I've moved too many times since then.
Right. So when did you do People and Places column?
We started talking about it on my 40th birthday, and probably within the next month at least I've started.
So that would have been about what year?
1961.
61.
Yeah.
And then how many years did you write the column?
I think for probably almost, I was past 65 when I stopped.
So about 24 or 5 years.
Yeah, in that vicinity. And then if they tacked on that I did it for however many years I did earlier, then they'll say longer, but in that vicinity, yes.
Didn't you meet your husband there?
Yes, he was a photographer at the Tulsa World.
And his name?
Johnny Walker.
Did he ever settle up to the bar and say, I want a drink with my name on it?
I'm sure he must have. I'm sure he must have. Anyway, then he passed away when, my children were grown. Everything was going great in my life. I loved it. Somewhere along the way, in about 10 years after he passed away, along came Steve Wolf, who I am married to today.
That's great. That's great. How many children did you have with Johnny?
2.
And
a boy and 2 girls, Stephanie and Amy. And that's it. Now, however, I have, combined with Stephen, 15 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren.
Great. Great. And so Johnny was a chief photographer for the Tulsa World.
Yes, and an attorney. He did both those things.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He even had a law office and everything, and then he would zoom in and be head of the photography department. I think he introduced color photography to the Tulsa World.
Really? Okay. And then he died in 2001, I think I have
I think, yes.
Right. Let's talk about the column now.
Okay.
And the scope of the column, what was it?
The scope of the column was all the things that were going on in Tulsa, particularly to raise money for various organizations. the goal was to shine a light on those organizations, probably to encourage people to realize that they're there and that they're value, and to acknowledge the people that were responsible for doing it all. All those people worked so hard, gave so much money. If they didn't give money, they worked really hard. And I just thought everybody ought to have their name in the paper if they would like to have it. That's how and I felt like I got to know the best of people in Tulsa because they were smart or they couldn't have done what they do. They were generous. They were very active. They were all felt privileged to get to be their friends.
You recall some of the foundations that you wrote about then?
The Salvation Army, because they had all those wonderful speakers. Mm-hmm. So I got to, one of the best parts of my job was getting to sit next to the people that came to either speak or in any kind of way. So I got to have conversations with just the best people, most not only famous, but worthwhile in what they were doing.
Right.
I thought that was the best part.
Salvation Army, any other foundations that we might...
oh, gosh, just everything.
Zero?
Oh, definitely.
The Henry Zero Foundation.
What a lovely, lovely man.
Right. Yeah, we have his interview on Voices of Oklahoma. Yeah. Was the Helmrich Foundation a trust then?
Yeah, they were huge. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Tulsa is rich in all of the things.
I kind of think that Tulsa... we're always competing with Oklahoma City, but I think we would be known as the foundation city.
I think so.
I just don't sense that they have it the way we have it here.
I don't think they do. I mean, not that I have personal knowledge particularly,
right.
And it isn't so much anymore because the press changes, what people want to read about changes.
Well, the column changed, yes, it went away.
Well, yeah.
Right, but the foundations are still doing their work today. I read some of your columns. Notice how you would name as many people attending the function.
Yes.
And, of course, those involved with the event. So getting all those names had to be a chore or was a labor of love for you. Talk to us about making sure their names got in there.
Well, making sure their names got in there, I guess I probably would have a list of the chairman and the Margaret, if I would have her name on a list because of the library thing, if I was covering that. Mm-hmm. But I see it through the years, I got to know all those people. So I would mainly try to make sure if I talked to somebody that I for sure mentioned them. Mm-hmm. So I think I did it more that way than, I'm sure I would always be sure to include the chairman and the main workers or the main donors, and then mostly the people that I would talk to. And depending on how much space I had on that day, I would try to include things that they knew about me, like a little squib of something interesting that had happened because of that organization, something along those lines.
Right. Those little squibs were interesting to people, I'm quite certain.
Yeah.
We like those. We call them nuggets.
Yes, nuggets.
Yeah. But I read one column where, there were about 15 names you had in there.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Did anybody get mad if their name wasn't mentioned?
Occasionally.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They would call?
Occasionally.
And you just have to say, I'm sorry?
I'll just say, oh my gosh, next time be sure and say hi and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I tried not to apologize all the time, but I would try to make it be that next time we'll work it out.
Yeah. Why did you try not to apologize?
I guess I just didn't want to be in that position, maybe.
Right. That could get old.
Yeah. But actually, people were super, super kind to me.
For the most part.
Yeah, super kind to me.
Yeah. Any column or columns that stand out to you in getting reaction?
People would say that once my column was in the paper, they would get tons more reservations. It would draw it to the attention. I found, and this is just funny, yesterday I was cleaning out a drawer, and I found an old thank you note, I guess, from Kathy Audley that used to be in charge of the library. And it was about the dinner that, not Margaret's dinner, but a dinner 20 years ago like that. And Eudora Welty had been the speaker. And I'm never going to let this go again because I didn't even know I had kept it. Anyway, so Kathy wrote this article that said something, Danna Sue, you are terrific. This article is superb. It is so much better than the news story side. You captured so much more of it. I mean, and just sweet, lovely, flattering things. I thought, I am so glad that I still have this note because that would have meant a lot to me. And I remember Kathy, and she was like just director of the library, I guess.
Kathy
Audley, I think was her name.
Okay, but you mentioned a Welty.
Oh, Eudora Welty was the author who came to speak. She's a Southern writer, an old Southern writer. Very, well known and everything. As I said, one of the best things has been meeting all those people that spoke at the library.
Peggy V. Helmrich dinner.
Yeah.
Once a year when they bring in an
Distinguished author dinner.
Right. Were they doing that when you were writing?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a whole long list of people that I wrote about and stuff. John Le Carre, he came, his real name was David Cornwell. He was so charming. We all had a big crush on him.
But it must have made you feel good when you're doing that column, all the good you were doing.
I loved it. In fact, later, soon before I retired, I remember quoting, and I'm not going to get this quote right either, Margaret Graham said...
Washington
Post.
Post.
Yeah. I mean, to me, but one of her quotes was, if you can do what you love and feel that it is doing good, what could be more fun?
That's no question about it.
Yeah, so absolutely. I used that quote a lot.
Oh, yes. But about thank you notes, did you get many? A
lot. Just wonderful ones.
And those have been lost in
Yeah, every once in a while.
Time.
Every once in a while I'll come across one.
Yeah.
But just people are so sweet.
Yeah.
Or no, sweet, kind, thoughtful.
Thoughtful.
Yeah.
Right. Don't you have some memories of stars that you met, like the opera star Beverly Sills?
Oh, yes. What a darling woman. It's really good to get to places early because sometimes you get to have a certain interaction that you wouldn't have otherwise. I got to the hotel. Beverly Sills was just getting there. She had not gone up to her room yet. And she said, well, come on, just come with me. So we went up to her room. She took her shoes off. She said, my feet are killing me. She said, and this is also what I have lost all my makeup. So she said, so on the way here, I had them stop by Walgreens, and I went in and bought all the makeup I could. And she said, that's it. This is it. Anyway, but just... anybody that and I'm sure all the people that you have interviewed, people that you can meet that you feel like you ever get an authentic nugget of how they really are, I just think it's just so rewarding.
Right, so then you wrote a story about her, obviously.
Yeah.
And that was within People and Places?
Yes, yeah.
So you could still write a column just on a person
Well,
that you
I
met.
was writing, I'm sure I also wrote about what she said during her speech and who was there and who the chairman was. It's always more fun if you can throw in stuff.
Right.
Because names, honestly, even if it's, kind of not that exciting after a while.
Who are some of the people you worked with at the Tulsa World? And we can take you back to 62 to maybe 86. Tell us some of the people you worked with at the paper.
Of course, Julie Blakely was the major player. Millie Ladner was a big writer then. Rusty Lang was the head of my section for a while. Well, Joe Worley came on board. Fabulous. What a lovely, darling, sweet man.
He became editor, didn't he?
Yeah. Before him, Sid Steen was the editor forever and again. I think that, I've said, I like people who have that way they work, the philosophy. They're really, they tell you, like, no, that wasn't very good, but they never make you feel weird. Most of the time they make you feel like you're smarter than you are and all the good stuff.
some of the time you were there, you had competition at the Tulsa Tribune, didn't you?
Yes, if a really good friend could be competition, Ella Cruson. She wrote a column similar to People and Places in the Tribune. I loved having the Tribune. It was a really nice situation. I think it made both papers better.
Right.
And
her name again is what?
Ella Cruson.
Ella Cruson.
Her husband was Judge Tom Cruson, who has passed away. I think he might have been head of the juvenile thing for a while. We used to go on ski trips with them all the time. Anyway, so that was a competitor. I used to actually go up and talk to Jink Jones a lot, not about my work because I didn't work for him, but just because he was, interesting, fabulous. I would like to go up and say hi, and we'd always get into some philosophical something or other. That was great.
That's Jink Jones Sr.
Or Jink and Lloyd Jones, yeah.
And we should point out you were all in the same building.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's why it was easy for you to do that.
Yeah.
Ella Cruson and could you be at the same event?
Oh, yeah, we would be.
And then were you interested how she wrote about it and she wrote
I'm sure I would look and see what she did. I mean, but of course we would both have already gone to press before we would ever have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, but once it was printed.
But then of course.
Right.
Like, I love that word that she used. Dang, that I didn't think of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for some of those foundations, they got double whammy then, didn't they?
They did.
Morning and evening.
Yeah.
There's some of us who still miss the Tulsa Tribune in
I
our
do.
driveway.
I do.
Right.
Yeah.
You had deadlines you had to meet, didn't you?
Yes.
So were you out for an evening thing, and when could your column have to be in?
Okay, sometimes I had to go back to the paper and write it if it was that important to get there the next day. So I'd have to go back to the paper, say at 9, 10, and write it for the next day. Generally, that did not happen. Generally, I would have the next day to do it. I am a person who likes to get done before the deadline because I don't like deadlines, so I'd rather be at 2 hours early and not even think about it. So I still do that now, which drives my husband insane.
You still do what?
Just want to be ready sooner.
Oh, yeah.
Get there sooner. Don't be late.
Right. Largely, then, you didn't meet deadlines. You could have your evening event and the next day write it, and it would be in the next day paper.
Right. I remember one time I covered something at Gilcrease, and I said, I was telling the main speaker, I said, I am going to have to go. So what do you want me to include, even though I'm not listening to your deal? And he said, I'll back you up, whatever you say. He said, you know what I'm going to say? Time and treasure. He said, just go for it. I'll back you up.
So you made up a speech.
I did, but I just quoted a few, which he probably said anyway.
Yeah. Well, you got to know people you would never have met because of People and Places.
Exactly. I mean, that was just wonderful.
Maybe you became friends with some of these foundation people or all?
Gosh, yeah, because some of them I had even met, earlier in life because Mother and Daddy were friends with a lot of people.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, you were around those country club people when you were very, very young, and then as you grew older, they still remembered you. And
yeah.
Since I'm doing oral history, and I'm a big fan of oral history, I discovered that you participated in the oral history project for the Junior League of Tulsa. And how did that come about? Do you know? Either, maybe you don't know why they did it, but they came to you to be one of the interviewers.
I am assuming it was because I was a member then. In the early days of that, in membership, you had certain jobs. I wouldn't call it a job, but projects that it would be good for you to be in because they were trying to get you to be throughout the community in whatever role you might have. So I'm imagining that's how it came about.
So you took that on, and because you had a curious mind, and you were interviewing people anyway.
Right.
I suppose that's one of the reasons they selected you. And I went through the lists. I don't have the whole list here, but one of them was Walter Biskup.
Yes.
A longtime reporter and editor for the Tulsa World. Anything significant about talking to him or what you learned?
Of course, I absolutely loved him. A gruff, curmudgeon-y, wonderful guy. I think he is the one who looked like notorious machine gun killer guy. And I'm trying
Machine
to,
Gun Kelly, they talked about?
oh, see, I'm not going to know. But he looked very similar to that human being. And he was mistaken for him sometimes. He even got to know the girlfriend of this particular gangster. This was back in the gangster days. And he even knew the girlfriend. And Walter took me to lunch one day, and he said, up those stairs is where I met the girlfriend of so-and-so. And had funny stories to tell about being in other places and people avoiding him because they thought he was this gangster.
Some of the other names that jumped out to me was Malvina Stevenson.
Yes, I loved Malvina. I did know her real well.
And she was a Tulsa World editor.
Right.
Or writer.
Right.
But she moved to Washington.
And she was a big writer in Washington, too.
Writing about...
the Washington scene, I think.
The social scene?
Yeah.
There?
I believe so. Because I even went there to see her one time, and just for the afternoon or something, I saw her in Washington.
And then the interview you did with her, she talked about her early days as a female reporter.
Right.
Right. Did you face any issues, probably not, as being female?
No, particularly probably in the area that I was
Right,
in.
right.
Yeah.
Right. But you remember Bob Forsman?
Oh, yeah. He was with the Tribune, I think.
Okay. He talked about important news stories of the 30s and 40s, discusses a murder case and criminals in Tulsa.
How interesting.
Right, right. But I skipped over Lewis Meyer, and I shouldn't have, because if he was here, he'd called me on it. You interviewed Lewis B. Meyer.
Yes.
Tell us who he was.
He was a local bookstore owner, and I always thought kind of a philosopher. He was very quiet, very soft-spoken, fun to talk to, always had a lot of books he wanted. And because I kind of knew him outside of his bookstore, although I don't exactly remember why, he was just very kind and kind of a soft person.
But he'd been on KVOO for many years, and actually, I could make sense out of it, maybe even a 2-hour program on that radio station. So he became known publicly that way.
Right.
And I had him on when I was at KRMG for a long time, and he was very engaging and very, very interesting. I would imagine, the newspaper business has changed so much. Today, they wouldn't have time for a people and places column, would they?
I don't think so.
Or space.
Or space, yeah.
We've lost a lot of that. Why have we?
Print media, just seems to have... It hasn't disappeared, but it's kind of fading, I think.
Seems to be fading.
I think there's just so much more immediacy on all news. Everybody gets their news on TV, radio still, thank goodness, online.
Yeah.
I have met people that have never even looked at a newspaper. They're, of course, usually younger. They don't take it. They don't even think about it. Right. And they get it online. And I think, I guess, because I met a woman one time who was an engineer, and I thought, gosh, she is going to be so interesting, because I bet she's really, really smart. Someone had just gotten through talking about, they took the Wall Street Journal or several different papers. And I said, well, how do you get your news, or something to that effect? And she said, on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything, but in my mind, I thought, okay.
Right. Right. Yeah, and readership has gone down, of course, for newspapers, and many have folded across the country.
Yeah.
So it's sad, but I want you to know that I'm one that has to have the paper in my hand.
Me too.
And I read the Tulsa World, I get the New York Times in my hand.
Exactly, me too. My husband and I have our coffee and the newspaper, and that is the serendipity of how the whole day begins.
Yes, absolutely.
We can discuss back and forth, argue about what we,
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I'm with you. We just have to have that. Because I think people who read even the Tulsa World online don't get the full flavor.
Oh, they don't.
Of what's happening. And you can easily miss a story I know they electronically send it to you, but it just isn't jump out.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
However, papers are forced to do that, and it is a revenue generator for them. I mean, people buy that or buy both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have editors who would look at your copy when you sent it in, and people would proof it or say, I think you should change this and that?
Yeah, yes. We had, like the head of whatever department, like I was in the women's department, so we would have that editor, and she would do it. Sometimes one of the other editors out in the rest of the room would look at it as well, not as often. I was called down because they said, well, you said that Betsy Horowitz gave a Christmas party. And they said, that's wrong. And I said, no, it's not, because she invited me and she had a Christmas party. But they wouldn't really want to change it around or use different words. They would want to help me, is how I looked at it. Like, oh no, that would be really a bad mistake. Don't do, so. And sometimes they were right, and of course, most of the time I was right.
Of course you were. So did that feel funny at sometimes when you felt you were really right and they said, no, you should write it this way? Did you have to give in to their assessment?
Well, it didn't happen very often.
Okay, I'm sure not.
But I'm sure, surely that must be, but I don't know that I ever lost. I think, but I could have. That's been, I wish I had a more vivid recollection of all the things you're asking me, because I would love to know myself.
After it went to print and somebody read it in the paper,
yeah,
and then did they come to you and you shouldn't have done this and that?
People would call and say, you shouldn't have given them that space. That they're not a good person.
Oh.
And I would say, well, it's not. You wouldn't want, I would say to them, you wouldn't want me to be the judge of who is the right person to be quoted. I said, that you wouldn't want that. That would be bad. Just let everybody do their thing and the chips fall where they may.
So they did call and say
okay,
that.
2 or 3 times I can remember.
Yeah. Somebody starting in journalism today, what skills do you think are really most important?
Curiosity. Look at what if you have a field, learn every single thing about the field, and then that can be your expertise. Or don't have an expertise and just kind of know the field. People always want to be Bernstein, and that's how a lot of people wanted to be.
Woodward and Bernstein?
Yeah. A lot of people, younger, said that was what inspired them. They would learn about Woodward and Bernstein, and they would think that they wanted to be a newspaper person. They wanted to find out stuff.
Because they were investigative and they popped the Watergate story.
Right.
Right. But they've got to follow what they really enjoy, right?
Of course.
Going back to Ms. Graham, what she said.
Yes.
I think everybody thinks they're a writer because we do write.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think because I can swing a golf club, I could be a golfer, but you can't.
But you just can't, exactly.
But you have to follow that, and you started writing when you were a child, so you had that in there. So if you told these people, if we want to be a writer, you got to really want to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just...
Of course, I think journalism or newspaper writing is so much different than writing a novel, because it's so immediate. I liked being able to relive what I thought was a fun time and talk about the people and talk about the event. That was pretty easy because it was immediate. Now, I have tried to think about writing a novel or anything like that, and I don't know that I can.
Mm-hmm. It's a different feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are there writers that you respected, kind of look up to?
Of newspaper writers and stuff?
Or even novelists or books? Or...
Oh, well, all the Baldacci, Patterson, all those guys.
But newspaper writers?
Newspaper writers. I thought what was the sports writer? Bill Connors.
Bill Connors, yes.
He was such a nifty guy, I thought, and I think he was just brilliant in sports writing. I don't know if I've ever picked out. Except for him, because he was such a huge figure the Tulsa World when I was there.
He was a star.
Yeah,
there's no question about that. Yeah, and was in with the Barry Switzers, and they all respected him. All the sports people respected him. In fact, the Tulsa World has been running some of his old columns.
I've read them.
And that's something?
Yeah. I think it was how the type of person he was too. He was very calm. I don't remember him throwing fits. Every once in a while a reporter will throw a fit.
Yeah. Nothing haughty about him at all.
Yeah, no.
Right. Maybe someday they'll rerun People and Places columns in the Tulsa World. It actually would be interesting, because older set, whatever, to go back, this was dated such and such.
Yeah.
I just know that would be an interesting piece.
Yeah.
We need to talk to them about that.
It's so dated now.
It is.
Yeah.
That's and that would be the very reason.
Yeah.
Are you writing anything today? Do you write? You do write?
No. I have a granddaughter who is... She's trying to get someone to even look at this book. She started in high school writing books. Now she has married, has 2 children, and is an assistant DA in Tulsa. So, and she's tiny and brilliant, and she has written several books and she says she's trying to get an agent. Somebody to even look at it, I think. I haven't been able to help her discover that, because I've never done that.
And what's her name?
Sarah Herrera.
All right. And so she picked up writing from you.
Well, that's what she thinks. She does storyboards and, has all these ideas and stuff. She does, the one that she's done now is sort of a mystery with a little magic thrown in. She wrote it because 5 years ago she called and said, "You want to take a trip with me and go do some stuff?" And I said, "Sure, where are we going?" And she said, "We're going to Salem, Massachusetts, because I want to research witch stuff." So we went to the 2 of us.
So she wrote about it.
And so it's woven into this book.
Well, you have been a big inspiration for her. You know that.
I love that. Where everyone says, "Oh my gosh, mini-me." It's great to have that relationship.
Absolutely. So how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as someone who could tell a good story, who was kind, makes people laugh and feel better.
That's a great way to be remembered. And I would concur with that. So thank you for sharing.
Well, you have made this easy.
Yeah. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Easy. You made it easy for people yourself when you were writing.
Thank you.
So, again, thank you. I appreciate it.
You have been listening to the Voices of Oklahoma podcast. Stories taken from the oral history website, voicesofoklahoma.com. At the website, you will discover an array of storytellers. Many you will know. Some will be new to you, but all will be worth your time. This work depends on listeners like you, who are interested in learning about the great people of Oklahoma. Our website provides an opportunity to donate to this 501c3 project, which preserves Oklahoma history, one voice at a time. voicesofoklahoma.com.